Module 1, Introduction to Greeks, Lecture 1B, Introductory Thoughts Continued. The branches of philosophy, let's learn some basic vocabulary. Metaphysics is the study of reality. What is really out there and how does it function, and does reality change? Sometimes the word ontology is used, which means being, what really is, what really exists. Some other important definitions. Dualism. There are two types of reality, body and mind, or matter and spirit. This seems to fit what we feel, also what Western religions teach. But how can mind affect body? Monism. There is only one type of reality. There's actually two types of monism. Materialism or material monism. Matter is the only reality. If so, where does consciousness come from? Many say consciousness is an illusion. Idealism. Only mind is real. George Berkeley thought to exist is to be perceived by a mind. If only mind exists, is matter just an illusion, as many Eastern religions teach? Determinism. If matter is the only reality and matter works by physical laws, then if we know all the laws, is everything set in advance? Do we know everything that will happen? And does that mean there is no free will? It's a major issue we will deal with. Epistemology, the study of knowledge. How do we know if something is true? And for that matter, what does it mean to be true? A major question in epistemology, which will be important for this course, is does knowledge come through our mind? Rationalism. This was Plato's opinion. Or does knowledge come through our senses? Empiricism. This was Aristotle's opinion. Two important Latin phrases. A priori, before the fact, or really before experience. Knowledge in our mind before we look out into the world. A posteriori, after the fact or after experience, knowledge in our mind after we look out into the world. We will ask the question, what is truth? Ethics, the study of good and evil, or right and wrong. What makes an act good or bad? Are ethics universal? Universal ethics? Or do they vary from person to person and culture to culture? Relative ethics? Or perhaps ethics are mere feelings. Philosophies divide the study of ethics into three broad areas. Metaethics is the study of the nature of ethical statements. Normative ethics is an attempt to develop a system to decide ethical questions. Applied ethics uses the system to answer practical ethical questions. Logic, the study of argumentation, for example, is the following a legitimate argument? A, the killing of innocent life is wrong. B, abortion is the killing of innocent life. Therefore, C, abortion is wrong. It looks like a good argument. Is it? I'll let you think about that. We will look at arguments such as this. Deductive logic. Arguments from premises to conclusions. If the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. A syllogism is a type of deductive argument. All A or B, so-and-so is an A, therefore so-and-so is a B. It is a form of deductive logic. We've already had an example. All men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Inductive logic. Arguments inferred from what we learn about the world. If the premises are true, the conclusion is likely true but could be false. In deductive arguments, if the premises lead to a conclusion, it is valid. If the premises are true, it is a sound argument. In inductive arguments, if the premises probably lead to the conclusion, the argument is strong. If the premises are true, it is a cogent argument. A fallacy is a mistake in logic. A major goal in critical thinking is recognizing logical fallacies. Aesthetics, the study of art and beauty. We've already introduced the terms objective and subjective. Let's go over some vocabulary words. Metaphysics, what is reality? Ontology, the study of being. Dualism, there are two substances. Monism, there is one substance. Materialism, the only substance is matter. Idealism, the only substance is mind. Determinism, everything has been pre-decided by physical laws. Free will, we have choices. Epistemology, the study of knowledge. Rationalism, all knowledge comes through our mind. Empiricism, all knowledge comes through our senses. A priori, before experience. A posteriori, after experience. Universal ethics, ethics applies to everybody in the world. Relative ethics, ethics only applies to certain people or groups. Metaethics, the study of the nature of ethical statements. Normative ethics, a system to decide ethical questions. Applied ethics, applying that system to very particular ethical questions. Logic, the study of arguments. Deductive logic, if the premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. Syllogism, a particular kind of deductive argument with 3 steps. All A or B, so-and-so is an A, therefore so-and-so is a B. Inductive logic, if the premises are true, the conclusion probably is true, but not definitely. A valid argument is a deductive argument where the premises lead to the conclusion. A sound argument is a deductive argument where the premises are true. A strong argument is an inductive argument where the premises probably lead to the conclusion. A cogent argument is an inductive argument where the premises are true. A fallacy is a mistake in argument. Objective means there's something universal within a piece of art. Subjective means it depends on the viewer. There will be many more vocabulary words to come. Philosophy seeks to arrive at truth through rational discourse. Both religion and science also try to arrive at truth, but using very different methods. What is the difference between philosophy, religion, and science? Philosophy and religion. Both philosophy and religion deal with ultimate questions, but they have very different methods at arriving at conclusions. Philosophy uses rational discourse to arrive at its conclusions. Religion uses faith, revelation, holy texts, and authority to arrive at conclusions. It would not be appropriate, for example, to write a paper for a philosophy class and then quote the Bible throughout to support one's position. Even if one believes the Bible to be true, one must support one's philosophical conclusions with rational arguments. Can one be a philosopher and a religious believer? The church father Tertullian, 160 to 220 of the Common Era, famously said no. What has Athens to do with Jerusalem? Athens is the center of philosophy, Jerusalem is the center of religion. The methods of philosophy have nothing to do with religious faith. On the other hand, St. Anselm of Canterbury, a deeply religious Christian, actively studied philosophy. He invented the ontological proof for the existence of God, which we'll look at later. It's a classic philosophical proof. He called philosophy faith seeking understanding. In medieval times, many religious thinkers used philosophy to strengthen their religious faith. One thinks about the Muslim thinker Avicenna, the Jewish thinker Maimonides, and the Christian thinker Thomas Aquinas. In more modern times, philosophers like Blaise Pascal, William James, Soren Kierkegaard were religious. But many other thinkers such as David Hume, Karl Marx, and Jean-Paul Sartre used philosophy to criticize religion. Philosophy and science. There was a time when science was a branch of philosophy known as natural philosophy. At the beginning of the Enlightenment period, science broke away and became its own discipline, separate from philosophy. Science studies the empirical world, the world we can experience with our senses, sometimes using instruments which enhance our senses. It has a very particular method of establishing scientific truth. A. Record data about the empirical world, such as the motions of the planets. B. Establish a hypothesis which explains that data. C. Continue to record data and test it against that hypothesis. D. The goal is to verify the hypothesis by the data. Science looks for truth that can be verified. Later, the modern philosopher of science Karl Popper, 1902 to 1994, taught that it is only real science if it can be falsified. A classic example is the scientific statement, all swans are white. For decades, this was considered a scientific fact, and then someone found a black swan, and the rule was falsified. Science seeks empirical knowledge, knowledge that can be verified through the senses. This leaves a number of questions that cannot be verified nor falsified through the senses. For example, what is reality? Is there a God? Does the soul survive death? One of those questions that cannot be verified through science is, what is good? The philosopher David Hume, who will study at greater length, 1711 to 1776, famously taught, we cannot learn an ought from an is. We cannot learn right and wrong from what we see in the world. In other words, we cannot learn ethics from science. The philosopher G.E. Moore called this the naturalistic fallacy. Here's an example of the naturalistic fallacy. More and more Americans are suffering from obesity. As a nation, we are growing heavier. Therefore, we ought to outlaw convenience stores from selling large, sugary drinks. New York City tried to do this. What is wrong with this argument? With these introductory thoughts on philosophy, it's time to turn to the roots of this ancient discipline. To do so, we must turn our attention to the ancient Greece. We will explore the pre-Socratic philosophers who began the philosophic quest, the sophists who taught the art of rhetoric on philosophical issues, the great Socrates who developed the art of rational discourse, and the two philosophers who most influenced Western intellectual history, Plato and Aristotle.